At El Pachuco Zoot Suits in Fullerton, the Estrella family has been keeping the Zoot Suit a la mode for the past 45 years. The 1940s attire popularized by Mexican and Mexican-American youth known for wearing the flamboyant styles that earned them the name Pachucos.
Just by me wanting one is what started all this, because I tried to buy one.
Estrella was fascinated by the suit and wanted one for her little brother. So she found a tailor to make one, which launched her business. And she found others wanted them too. Her son and daughter-in-law now run the business.
In the very beginning, word of mouth, and then social media.
Social media took the authentically reproduced look to a worldwide audience, with customers from around the globe and nearby Hollywood.
We work with actors, we work with movies and theater, but mostly, I mean, our number one clientele is our own community.
Decades of discrimination had forced the Mexican-American community to turn inward. By the 1940s, LA's 250,000 Mexican-Americans lived in a series of tight-knit neighborhoods called barrios. The communities were traditional, conservative, and self-contained. But like many Mexican-Americans of his generation, Hank Levas refused to accept the confines of the barrio. There was a different America outside their neighborhood, and Hank and others like him wanted to claim a piece for themselves.
The tensions that arose from this sort of splitting of culture is that often parents really saw their children disappearing from them, from the sanctity of the barrio, from the cultural world. Even though physically they remained, they more often were the people that would venture into various aspects of American culture.
These kids spoke to each other in English, and it was an English that was punctuated by jazz phrases, cool, hip, on time. All of these kinds of things that they very clearly drew from jazz culture during this period. And some of the boys from 38th Street will tell you they didn't know Spanish during this time. They didn't speak Spanish.
The wartime economy put money in the kids' pockets. In 1942, they were spending it on big balloon pants, pegged at the ankle and long, baggy coats, a style borrowed from African Americans. It was called the Zoot Suit. The Zoot Suit was everywhere. In the nightclubs, kids in Zoot Suits ruled the dance floor. Their stoic moves, the essence of LA cool.
All he do is get the girl's arm like that, and she go around him, and he put his arm out this way, and then she go around about 3 times, and he go like that, because that guy was not gonna move. He didn't want to wrinkle the coat or nothing. He didn't want to mess up his pants.
As soon as they would get out of the house, they would beeline straight down to Central Avenue. A lot of jazz clubs were, and they would go there to listen to jazz artists and to dance the swing, and all of these things that their Mexican parents would probably not have approved of, and they found ways of sneaking around that. And in fact, wearing the Zoot Suit, I would say, was part of that.
Many times I wore my skirt just above my knee till I got around the corner, and then I'd roll it up at the waist. And so that it'd be really short, you know. Then coming back from school, we'd just pull them down. The boys wore their pants very wide at the knee. They were always to be 40 inches at the knees and 10 to 11 inches at the cuff. So they were very ballooned out, very high-waisted.
Their outrageous clothes and cocky attitudes shocked their traditional parents, who feared their sons and daughters were becoming pachucos.
In Los Angeles in the early 40s, the word pachuco meant punk. These were ill-mannered kids. These weren't the kids that you wanted your children to hang out with.
Many white Los Angelinos felt threatened by their assertive presence. To them, any Mexican kid in a zoot suit was a potential pachuco.
By wearing their zoot suits and swaggering down the streets in public, these kids defied the norms of segregation. It's hard for us to imagine, but to go back in the context of the 1940s, when everything around you told you, you're not one of us, you're not American, and because you're not American, because you're not white, you're supposed to remain in your neighborhoods, you can't go to our clubs, you can't go to our restaurants, you can't go to our movies, and on and on and on. And of course that's going to breed some sort of resentment.
I first met Cesar in 1946 when I was 6 years old. And he was a running partner of one of my cousins there in Delano. They're both pachucos. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was Cesar. The pachuco experience, which was his teenage youth, was born out of this cultural fusion. You know, the jazz age and the swing music came together with Chicano culture to create the pachuquismo, right?
It was an identity. It was the first generation of those Mexicano families who would come into the United States, the firstborn, who were identifying themselves as being totally different than their mothers and fathers. I'm not Mexicano, I'm Chicano, because I speak English, right? What I did.
He was of popular culture, man. He was no different than any other Latino kid growing up in the United States, you know.
He loved to dance. Oh, he loved to dance.
When I met Cesar, we were walking down the halls of KPFA over here on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley, and there was a poster there that was for the San Francisco Blues Festival that was featuring Jimmy Liggins. And Cesar stopped and he looked, and he goes, "Is he still around?" And I said, "You know who this guy is?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, "I used to go dance to him when I was a young pachuco." I said, "You were a pachuco?" He goes, "Oh yeah, man." He goes, "And I love jazz and blues." He goes, "Coleman Hawkins is my man."
A lot of people have no idea that the leader of the Farm Workers Union was this guy that had this urban soul inside him, right? And that his taste in jazz music was probably the finest expression of that flower, you know.
I went on a trip with him to New York about a month before he passed away. During the day, we spent time going to different used music shops and used bookstores. And he had a list of about 100 of, the top 100 jazz albums that he wanted to get. And he literally would carry it around in his back pocket and pull it out and cross it off as he would find them, as he would purchase new pieces. He really appreciated jazz, and he used to scat with us all the time. We didn't realize that what he was doing was scatting. He would call us skitty beam boom and skitty bop bop, and we just thought that he couldn't remember all of our names because there were so many of us.
What I had perceived of him as a young zoot suiter is not untrue. He was, but he is more, and he can be that and a leader at the same time. The leaders can come out of that field. They don't have to come out of ivory towers. They can come out of the rocks and the soil and the sand of Delano.
As soon as they would get out of the house, they would beeline straight down to Central Avenue. A lot of jazz clubs were, and they would go there to listen to jazz artists and to dance the swing, and all of these things that their Mexican parents would probably not have approved of, and they found ways of sneaking around.
Since the 1930s, Central Avenue had been steadily growing with the African American migration to Southern California, when waves of black laborers left the South and migrated to the North and the West in the Great Southern Diaspora. Los Angeles quickly became a mecca for jazz artists such as Coleman Hawkins, T-Bone Walker, and Zoot Sims, and West Coast jazz began to take form there. 28 young aficionados would gravitate toward the clubs where these artists would play, among them white teenagers such as Art Pepper, Johnny Martizia, and Jimmy Henson, listening religiously for hours and hoping to get the chance to sit in on an after-hours jam session. Central Avenue was more than a practicing ground for aspiring musicians. It was a curious place that attracted all kinds of wandering souls in search of entertainment or spiritual release and renewal. Surely the intensity of jazz performances, the artistry of musical expression, and the seemingly effortless freedom with which the musicians' souls found release in the mournful and celebratory sounds of jazz stood out in marked contrast to the social conformity celebrated by wartime society. Moreover, jazz musicians seemed to enjoy a special kind of camaraderie among themselves that defied the racial perimeters of the day. Music has always been the same to me, recalled Lee Young. It never had any color to me. Thus, while black working folk were the lifeblood of Central Avenue, one would also find Filipinos, white middle-class rebels, or Mexican-American teenagers like Henry and Lupe Leyvas hoping to catch sight of Louis Armstrong, Artie Shaw, or Glenn Miller. The appeal that jazz music and life held for young people rippled through the community, for although jazz was primarily an African-American art form, there was a growing market of devotees among young people of every shade. The clothing styles, linguistic inventions, and behavior, loosely known as jazz culture, framed the nascent youth culture.
I don't need to tell you that Los Angeles is not a real city. It's just a whole bunch of neighborhoods sharing the same name. One of our neighborhoods was called Central Avenue. And I know the avenue is still there, but what's central is missing. People stayed up late, but they also got up early because their community was the entertainment center of town. Certainly thriving, if not prosperous. Everybody knew everybody else.
That was the place to go to see your friends. But you walked up and down Central to see your friends and to see what other people were doing, and you wanted to be with them, and you wanted to celebrate with them, and there they were.
It was like the people from the Avenue had their own world going. It was wonderful. Nobody seemed to mention it much outside of the area. And now it was probably better than we all knew.
Down in the middle of the block was the Club Alabama. Had Johnny Otis's big band in there with a stage show, chorus girls and everything. T-Bone Walker, blues singer, as the star. Across the street was The Last Word. I think you got the pictures of it, with jam sessions going on. All the jam sessions at that time were bebop oriented. And what made bebop so important, they would have after-hours jam sessions. When you leave the Downbeat or the Alabama, one of them clubs there, you could go down to Jack's Basket Room on 33rd and Central, where you'd have Dexter Gordon, Miles Davis, Wardell Gray, all these people that would be down there. Everybody would be jamming.
Central was the place that we went to take care of business. We could shop, we could get hardware, newspapers were put out on Central. Central was almost like the main street in a small village. You could do anything there. During the time when Joe Louis was in his heyday, when he would have a fight, Central was quiet as you couldn't find anybody. Everybody is in their house listening to the fight.
Right and left to the head, a left to the jaw, a right to the head, and Donovan is watching carefully. Lewis measures him, right to the body, a left up to the jaw, and Schmeling is down.
And whenever he would win, Central came alive. People would rush, walk, drive, get to Central to talk about, to celebrate, and drive up and down Central, blowing horns and yelling at each other. Oh, he won, and oh, wow. That was a big deal.
So there you have it. Some things on Central Avenue are gone, but the music and the memories live on.